Good evening, everyone. My name is Carlia Swanson, and I'm Miss Fort Lauderdale, and we are just super excited to be back with another Music is Unity artist series. I'm just so excited to present this evening my teacher, professor, saxophonist, musician, Professor Jim Carroll. How
Wow. Gosh.
are you? Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Professor Carroll. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's just really good to have just any kind of interaction at this time. It's really wonderful, especially with you, Carlia. I
Aw.
really miss you. My gosh. Oh.
I miss you too. So we're at the beginning of a new year. I was just wondering, do you have any like New Year's resolutions?
I know I don't make resolutions because I never keep them. I learned a
You
long
know
time
what?
ago.
You guys said that.
Yeah, I just, I try to make a resolution and it feels good. Like resolutions feel good for about a day. And then the next day when I break it, so
Mm.
I gave up on the resolutions a long time ago.
That's like
But
me with working out. I do good for a couple of weeks, and then you say, "Oh, I'll do it tomorrow," then the next day, and then it doesn't really happen. So me either. Me either, Professor Carroll.
absolutely. So, but starting a new year, we're back at school, trying to go virtual. We are meeting one day a week with the band in person at the Center for the Arts, and we have plexiglass shields trying to follow the protocols. And we've had pretty good luck so far. And we recorded a Jazz for Justice last semester. And so let's see. So I have my Jazz for Justice mask.
Oh, nice.
So all of that's going on, and we're going to do right now. We're shooting. We have some projects. So we're shooting a thing with our faculty for the Prince William County schools aimed at younger schools. We're looking at the golden age of jazz, and jazz is so underrepresented in our curriculum. So any chance I get to put something out there and talk about our beautiful music, I'm going to do that. And then International Jazz Day, we're going to bring out all the stops and do a big film shoot out at the Hilton Performing Arts Center for International Jazz Day. So
Oh,
that's on the schedules.
that's incredible. So, Professor Carroll, you have a lot going with the ensemble. So, where would you say that the role of the arts is in a pandemic?
Oh gosh. Well, I don't know. I mean, same as always, frankly. I mean, I think, since the beginning of time, one thing I wish, and so can I ask you, so who would the audience be for what we're doing right now? Who are you? Is it a large audience? Who would they be normally?
Students, musicians, my Facebook friends, other professors, people like that.
Yeah, so I'm just curious about because I always thought it's funny when somebody's on TV and they say, "Hi, I love you all," but they don't really know who's there. So, but no, well, the arts just in general, I think, the arts do build community and the arts brings people together. But so one thing I want to say about that though that I've noticed more and more, it's like folks want to talk about music, and so without throwing anybody under the bus, because I always believe it's better to be for something than to be against something. But I did have the occasion. It's been a while back, but I had this event. I want to be cautious because I don't want to throw anybody. But anyhow, so there were some administrators went to this, and we had come. I collaborated with an visual artist. It was incredible, and he did these great collages, and it was at the Nationals ballpark, and there was another artist who had this wonderful piece of a in still time of the bat being swung. And so I went over there with our administrators, and I had arranged some stuff, and man, they didn't even take the time to check the art out. And then I was really hoping, like, I wanted them to listen to and it really occurred to me, yeah, man, they just talk about the music or write about the music. But for me, more than ever, the sound of John Coltrane's tenor saxophone. That's always, I mean, we can always pull out those recordings at any time. And so the value of that, in particular, America's great artists like Train, and we were just talking about Cannonball Adderley, but, more lesser known, unfortunately, like a guy like Rahsaan Roland Kirk, who is completely unknown now. I mean, I brought him up. I was at his last performance at Indiana University at the Frangipani Room. I remember, and he passed on to be with the Lord the next morning on the way to the airport in Bloomington, Indiana. But So my point I'm trying to make is, just in the music itself, it seems like somehow we've gotten away from just, yeah, like really listening to the music and letting it come into our heart and coming into our soul. So during this time, I think it's, same as all the time. One of the things I would recommend to any listener, I love my friend Wynton Marsalis. He did in 2009. So the Nancy Hanks lectures are given annually at the Kennedy Center, and it's the most significant address on the state of the arts public policy in America. Of course, in America, we do not have a ministry of the arts. We're the only civilized country in the world that does not have a ministry of the arts. And so, but anyhow, this address I think is awfully important. 2009, Wynton Marsalis gave the address, and he calls it the ballad of the American arts. So in the jazz world, we just call it the ballad, but it's just packed with incredible. It's just wonderful. He plays and he talks, but he starts that out with, before we sang, we spoke, before we danced, we walked, before we wrote, we told stories, before we told stories, we lived. These songs, dances, writings allow us to speak to one another across generation to generation. So that idea is like, what the heck? I can talk to John Coltrane. Yeah. And there's some nice interviews where Coltrane's talking. He's so humble, and Bird too. Man, you can really hear, but more than that, in the music itself, because Coltrane would always talk about, I want to be a force for good in the world. He said on an interview, I know there are sources that want to tear people down and be destructive, and and have a, like Stevie Wonder says, a gun and Bible in my hand, and with expression on my face, give me what I want or I will destroy. John Coltrane said, I wanted to be the opposite of that. To be a force for real good in the world. And I just submit to everybody during this time, the answers are in the music. And it's powerful. It's quite frankly, a lot of times the written word is full of errors or mistakes or this person's take on it or that person. But I would encourage anybody, go listen to John Coltrane's Alabama. Coltrane's Sound. That's one of my favorite albums of John Coltrane. Of course, The Love Supreme. So I'm trying to listen to some late period Train, Carlia, which I still I don't understand it. So I'm working on that a little bit. But anyhow,
I agree. I think people need to be more about the music and not only listening to the music. I think learning the history of the artists and the lives that they live that influence that music that they make. Because I think, like you say, Louis Armstrong is your hero. And I think if more people listen to him and learned his history and how he was an advocate, the smile that he wore on his face, that's what the music is about as well.
I love what you just said, Carly. Yeah, and hanging in the lobby of Mason School are the portraits. It's abstract expressionism by Frederick James Brown. And Frederick James Brown, at first time I saw it, because it's so colorful, like any great artist, like, okay, well, that's interesting, and doesn't really look like him, and blah blah blah. But I didn't realize, because I'm kind of ignorant when it comes to art, but every time I walk into the School of Music, and there's one of Train also, Frederick James Brown, but I just kind of let the feeling of it come into my heart, and you can really see he captures the sadness that Louis had, and the heavy weight that Louis had, the tears of a clown, but also the strength that Louis Armstrong had, and the courage that he had, and the loneliness. You can see it's all in that. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. And quite frankly, now at this time of Black Lives Matter, this stuff is not in our. It's not that it's been erased; it was never there in the first place. And I would say we just got to do a way better. And it's hard. I don't know, Carlia, what do you think? Our systems resist change, and to try to point this out in a loving, it's very, very difficult to do it with love, and which is the only way, by the way. Things work. It's got to be done with love, like the way I love. Yeah, Lou, you're right, Louis, but Duke Ellington too. I mean, Ellington was right back there, and Train and Burr. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. That this music, touches my innermost soul. And so, yeah, at this time, by the way, of the pandemic, so yeah, I just been getting to listen. Man, Ellington alone, I have there's so much I haven't heard. I'm 65. There's so much I haven't heard.
You look good.
So, well, anyhow, hey, go ahead and cut me off. How we have a
I
professor.
think one of the great experiences with you is being in big band, being in class with you, your personality, the energy you bring. So, how have you been adjusting? How has life changed for you, and how have you been adjusting to all this virtual?
Well, not very well. So up and down, I have days up and down and I have days. So just to be frankly, like I have this deep desire to become a gypsy or like to to run away. So I'm just, I just to be frank. So and then other days I'm okay. It changes. I have noticed this. So I'm trying to do some work in the community. So my wife, her family are in the Philippines and they're really struggling there. And it has really hurt certain communities more than others. And so, but in Philippines, it's been hard. The work isn't there. So, and then I've been doing some work in recovery also. And so I've been seeing it's been tough there because, so folks are really struggling. I mean, so the answer is easy. Anytime that I get too far down, I just go find somebody else who's hurting worse than I and try to go help them. And then that's the formula. If there's a formula for life, get God, clean house, and help others. Get God, clean house, help others.
That's so
Like,
true. So, what are some of the challenges that you've seen amongst your students in the
so
pandemic?
the students now, and right now, they're kind of, my students are in a groove right now. I think it's the older folks that are having more trouble. I think the ability to adapt is just a sign of intelligence. I think younger people do it better. Having said that, I am working with some high school students, nothing to do with Mason, but some private students that I'm just helping out. And so they're having trouble with adapting to the online curriculum. But I don't know enough about how it's being presented. So, and I have seen that the high schools are not doing as well. But my college, they're doing okay overall. And for me, me, this is time for personal growth, for personal practice. So, and in the jazz field, let's face it, we got to pound out those long hours. So this has been just a great time to get in the practice room. And so I've switched the curriculum entirely and we're focusing, more. And frankly, that's what's needed anyhow. We have all our social time. So, but overall, I'm going to say that my students are doing pretty well.
That's great. So you mentioned personal growth, right? So what is something you would say you learned about yourself being quarantined?
So, I need my students probably.
Oh,
Really need, like, yeah, more so, and so, I've always been kind of a loner. I think a lot of musicians are that way. I think about Charlie Parker practicing 11 to 15 hours a day. My gosh, that's what he says on that tape. 11 to 15 hours a day of practice. And yeah, the neighbors, he said they wanted him to move or they wanted to move or whatever. So I just realized, Carly, how much we need one another and how much I really rely on my students and the synergy and the energy of the university. And what my favorite thing is to drive to school and have really great music on. And, it might even be a pop song sometimes, how it'll hit you just a certain way. And yeah, and, it might be Cannonball or it might be, it could be anything. It could be Stevie or, and so I miss that. I miss driving in and I always had it in my mind too, when I go into school, I want to be a professional. And like a switch, I say, I'm going to walk in with a smile on my face and a spring in my step, regardless of what's going on in my personal life. Just like and after repeating that day after day after day, it just becomes automatic to do that. And so, yeah, I miss that part of it. So, but hey,
yeah.
so I have a question of you. Can I ask you?
Yeah.
So, when people get older, why do they like to talk about themselves all the time, do you think? Have you noticed that?
I don't think that's the case. I think that
Really?
I think you've had a lot of life experiences that you would like to share, like others
Yeah.
would like to share. So the more
Would,
life you have, the more stories you have to tell.
would you like to hear stories of when I played with Woody Herman?
Yes.
You're a horrible liar, Carlia.
Oh man.
So,
Okay.
which may I'm teasing. So, have you ever heard any of those stories?
I, maybe once or twice.
Yes, the students still, I hold them hostage with that stuff. And they
Oh,
got to sit there. And what's great is like right halfway through, I'll remember, oh, geez, I just told this story.
I love the stories. I love those stories are what makes you you.
Well,
So,
thank you.
can you take me back to the early stages of Mason Jazz, finding that program and developing it?
So, well, yeah, thanks. In that regard, I hope because I had a set of 12 principles, guiding principles that I built the program on. And the number one was do not attach my own name to any program or ensemble. And it's just something that I decided to do. I'm not saying someone else shouldn't do that and then, attach their name. Folks do that, but I decided not to do that because I wanted it at the beginning something that I could pass on. And as you know, so Dr. Darden Purcell leads the program now, who is probably the most amazing administrator I've ever worked with in my whole life. She's completely and totally like what a gift to get to work with this giant. And then for me too, because it was my baby, and who am I going to pass this program on to? So even though, but at the very beginning, yeah. So I started there. I didn't really have any intention of building the program. So I went in just to run the jazz band part time, and I was touring with the Smithsonian Jazz Masterworks Orchestra, um, which was established by Congress from House Resolution 57, which is a very important document, by the way, that I think anybody who is interested in America's music, take a look at House Resolution 57, promulgated in 1987. It goes back to. So I had that document, and I was playing with the Smithsonian Band. That started. I was one of the charter members with Gunther Schuller and David Baker. Started that band, and I was playing lead alto in and out. I was actually serving as the kind of like paymaster and doing some managerial stuff with the band. But that's when I got really, really, really interested in jazz history more than I had been in school. Because my career, Carly, is more like a gigging musician, and a lot of times, frankly, I'm just playing the gig, trying to put food on the table, and so I did all kinds of gigs that they were gigs just to like I played the circus, and which was a fun gig. I mean, they were all fun. So, but back to Mason Jazz, I never really had any intention to, and I was really of those that can do, and I rolled in there, and frankly, people like you showed up, like, and it just came into my heart, and I thought, wow, there's no jazz here. How can that be? I just saw a real need to build. So I started, thinking about the entire ecology. So I started curriculum, started as a minor, and then I just kind of grabbed things as they would come and seize opportunities because Mason was very young also. So then there was an opportunity to have a professional jazz orchestra with Rick Davis helped us. So that's how we started the Metropolitan Jazz Orchestra. And my dream there was so students had, because I got to go out. Did I mention I played with Woody Herman? So I got to do that and a bunch of other things and Smithsonian and this band and that band and play with John Von Ohlen and Al Cobain had a band even when I was in school, and the young students don't have that now. So I thought we'll build our own, and if they're good, they can get on that band. Then we started a summer jazz camp, and then built a jazz website. Then we had Jazz Activity Fund, which were gigs, so the students were going out and jam sessions. So I thought of the entire ecology. And then eventually, so we got the undergraduate passed, and I just modeled the program after my mentor, David Baker. So I literally, even in terms of the economics, that we have huge classes that could help subsidize the smaller classes. And then, yeah, like people like you and you should start huge successes, that were going out and having careers playing, and a lot of military musicians, teachers. It went on and on and on. So, yeah, and so in the early days, I have to tell you that it was rough. The salary wasn't quite there, but I listened to this great interview of Coleman Hawkins. Jamie Aebersold had sent this, or I forgot. I think maybe it was Jamie, but Coleman Hawkins was talking about Carlia playing all night and into the morning in the club, and the place was packed. and the club owner was paying Coleman Hawkins and the band zero. Like
Wow.
I've always heard, why do jazz musicians practice 6 hours a day to play a $25 gig at the corner bar? They weren't even paying him $25. They weren't, he says this on the tape. They weren't even giving him food
Oh.
or yeah. So I'm thinking like, wow, man, that's the jazz culture, or what about you? I mean, you're working now on your master's in vocal jazz, right?
Yes.
So yeah, so and you're going to graduate in May. So can I ask you, like, so how come you went into jazz, Carlia?
Um, well, I grew up singing in church, and then I started playing classical piano. I didn't really, I mean, I liked it. I was okay at it, but I didn't really love it. So I got to college and I was kind of unhappy with that decision. And then I saw a jazz voice lesson with Dr. Purcell. I shadowed it and I was like, this is what I want to do. And it's kind of, I don't know, similar to like my church background. So I can incorporate some of that within jazz and I loved it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it is a lifestyle, and it's something I think for all. What a gift, and folks don't understand that, that, and even in the jazz community, I remember we had a club down in New Orleans with Woody's band, and it went total bank. It was horrible failure financially, and the one of the guys, he owned a contact lens factory. He alone lost $1 million in the club. It was complete failure. Like, how do you make a million opening a jazz club? You start with 2 million. So what's my point? So we hadn't been paid for several weeks. And this would have been like 1982 or 3 or somewhere around there. So Woody passed on to be with the Lord a couple of years later. But so the whole band got together, said, we're not playing anymore. And I was like, no, let's play. I want to play. I don't care. I want to play. What? We're here. So I've always been that way. And to a fault, I've been around other musicians and Jim, that's harmful. If you're going to do it for nothing, why is anybody ever going to, and I learned in Columbus, Ohio, there's a guy there by the name of Ray Eubanks who taught me maybe my thinking was off. And I saw his point and I see his point, but I'm still that way today, Carlia. I don't care. I just want to play. I want to play this music. And I like what Winton says, don't be in love with yourself on stage playing the music. Be in love with the music. And man, just think about this music we get to play.
I love from performing. I love the feeling that overcomes me when I'm performing, and also like the transfer of energy in the audience, the way you can feel the crowd react. And I think, it's not always about money, because I feel like whatever I give, I'm going to get back double fold. So when it's about the music, I think you should be paid at times, but I think there's nothing wrong with playing sometimes for free.
Well, I love that. And that's personal. So I don't try to, put that on, but I will say this too, in my musical life, my greatest times actually haven't been on stage playing. It's been sitting in the audience, like sitting here, and Count Basie was right there and Marshall Royal was right there, and talk about adrenaline, like, oh my gosh. And I got to see Ellington several times.
Wow.
Or up in, I remember I went to Berkeley as a youngster. I remember I'm just like 14 or 15 years old and going to, Paul's Mall and seeing Elvin Jones, and Frank Foster was there, and it goes on and on, or going to get to hear Horace Silver. And like Jesus, so really it's been in the sitting in the audience that I've had, so many times that of course, hey, there's nothing like being on the road. But not to change the topic, but what about the movie Soul? Did you get to see that yet then?
What did you think about it?
I thought it was killing, awesome.
Yeah.
So my favorite part was Miss Tia Fuller, who plays the alto sax part in it. Tia's killing. Like, does she sound good on it or what? She really. But in the movies, how it's just jive turkey, like whatever, and they're holding the horn. So the animators, how did they do it? I mean, did you notice she was actually playing? I mean, and you could even see her Van Doren mouthpiece in that. So from my standpoint, it's like, what? It was totally amazing. Plus, Tia's amazing, and her solo, so, and then the message of it is great. And So that's, yeah, that's it. You play the gig and you come back the next day and you play the gig again and the next day and the next day. So what did you think then? What was your take on it?
I think it was great, and I think it's our young people aren't being exposed to jazz music, so I think it's going to spark some interest amongst young people to like, what is this movie really about, and to actually start going back and listening to some jazz.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the one thing that I didn't like about the movie is how it portrayed my man as a teacher. Like, man, teaching is great. I never thought that I wanted to do it, but yeah, we need good teachers. We need people, and I'm not, so I have a lot to learn about it. But the teaching profession is absolutely, I mean, we need, a teacher can influence so many lives. And so I didn't like that part of it. And the fact of the matter is, in music education, our educators in music are superheroes. I mean, they have one, like that scene in the movie. I mean, actually, he's in the no-win scenario because they have to do everything, and,
With no
marching.
money.
Pardon me?
With no money.
Yeah, with no budget and and administrators that are worrying about big picture items and they're not thinking about curriculum or just simple things in music like teaching students how to play some songs. So we're at a state of absurdum in music education in America, where our young people come up and they don't even know the name Duke Ellington. Never hear the name Charlie Parker. They go through the whole period, not even to mention, like James Moody or also, and it's not, I don't, it's, no, I don't blame I've made that mistake actually to go in and say, hey, you don't have jazz band here? So, and they're doing the marching band and the drum line and the concert band and the symphony orchestra and the library and blah, 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 blah. And talk about work-life balance. So I learned my lesson the hard way, but that's an issue. I really think.
So how do you balance between being a performer, educator, artistic director, finding Met Jazz, finding Mason Jazz? How do you balance?
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that because and to answer about the pandemic, so I'm better now. So I wasn't doing it well. And so I was a little obsessive compulsive with it, which wasn't fair to wife Jeanette. So we talked about it. And when I started the program, I asked her permission. I told her what it was going to be like. Because that's how it is. I watched my mentor, David Baker. I mean, David slept 4 hours a night. And like jazz arranging would meet Saturday morning at like 7:30 in the morning.
Whoa.
I mean, this guy, David Baker, was one of the, so yeah, I was his grad assistant, so I got to see up firsthand what he did. So this has been better because I've had a little more work-life balance, and I've realized the health of trying to have that. But so yeah, it's my old, so hey, reminds me of a joke. Can I tell you a joke, Carlita? So, here's my favorite obsessive compulsive joke. So Rabbit walks into a bar and says, hey, barkeep, you got any grapes? Bartender says, grapes, get out of here. We sell hard whiskey for people who want to get drunk fast. Get out of here and don't ever come back again. Rabbit comes into the bar the next day and says, hey, barkeep, you got any grapes? I thought I told you to get your little furry butt out of here. If you ever come in here again, I'm going to nail your little butt to that wall. Dig? Next day, the rabbit comes in and says, hey, barkeep, you got any nails? Nails? What are you talking about? I don't have any nails. Good. You got any grapes? It's my obsessive. So yeah, it's that probably more than anything, but the music, I get up in the morning, it'll be this issue or that issue, and could always put something on in the morning. And so, but I will say this, Carly, I think we were talking earlier, I got to be careful too, because I've had troubles in my life, like making music my God, and it cannot be, and if music and the arts are so great, why do we have so many troubled souls in the arts? Why do we have so much self-absorption, in a lot of the arts and in many, many, many fields? And so for anything, if I could be serious for a moment, right now, mental health issues are probably, we have so many issues on planet Earth. But that issue, for some reason, that's taboo. People don't want to talk about it. and help me if I'm wrong, it's my opinion, but you know how everybody, I believe, has bigoted ideas. Every human, when somebody says, I don't have a racist bone in my body, give me a break. I mean, we all have notions and things. Am I right about that? Would you agree? So, and so the same thing is true, I think, with mental health. I think we all have our stuff, you
Yeah,
know,
I
to
don't.
one degree or another, you know? And so to be, introspective about that and to have some, that's why I don't apologize, that at one point I was making mistakes in my life and I turned my life over to the Most High God and, or my version of what that is. And I really feel at that moment before that, I was living life in black and white. And at that moment, all of a sudden, oh my God, Jim Carroll and God are a majority. That opened up that because a lot of times we lack power, a source of power to do something to change our circumstances, and for me, just frankly, I ended up in a place where no human power could help me. So that was not a good place to be, frankly. But I kind of digressed into that just a little bit because I think at this time and for this conversation, amongst everything else, I think for all of us, and I'm so proud of you, Miss Fort Lauderdale. And I know, so is this series a part of Miss Fort Lauderdale? It's a branch, it comes out of that. Am I right?
It's a part of the Miss America organization. So I'll be competing in Miss Florida in June.
Well, I love it. I'm so proud of you. And so, well, I'm going to beauty contest tomorrow morning too, by the
I
way.
think you'll win. I'll think you'll win. I like what you said. I like what you said. I think sometimes as humans, we try to do everything by ourselves, or we try to control everything, or when things don't go our way, then that's kind of when we spiral. But when we turn that stuff over to God, I mean, and let Him be in control of it, that's when things.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. So, and yeah, and then for me, I'm just able to make decisions that I would not otherwise make. If I can get my ego out of the way, and if I can, just think how the other guy must feel, just, and that's hard sometimes, but, if you don't mind, it popped into my mind. But before, I want to hear more about, because, our pop culture and TV, we have everything there. And so I did take time and I was looking, I'm so proud of you and all the work that you're doing and with this pageant and how much good that's being done. So what else are you involved with besides this series right now?
So music is unity. I started that when I was in the 8th grade. And so I go into nursing homes and schools and I talk about the importance of music to the young people. And I found that like being in nursing homes, a lot of the residents, they don't have visitors. So me being in there, being able to build that relationship with them, to see a smile on that face. So that's kind of what I've been doing. But in this virtual pandemic, I've kind of turned more to giving artists a platform and being able to showcase some artists through some virtual shows. So that's really what I've been doing.
No, I'm so proud of you. It's really, and so I really think, yeah, in the arts, we support the arts in one level, but at this time we need creative folks. We need answers. We need to cook this together a different way. I believe that the answers are there.
That's true. People say like we want to get back to normal, but normal really wasn't working. If you have students in schools that can't afford internet, right? And so a pandemic happens and they can't contact their teacher, do schoolwork. That's not normal. That, people are living below the poverty line. Then a pandemic comes and people are saying we got to get back to normal. But what was normal really wasn't working.
Yeah, well, that's right, Carlia. I think about everything. It's just self-centeredness, and I've struggled with that. I have to tell you, I grew up, and so guess now at Mason they're having me teach sight singing this semester.
Oh.
So we're doing, yeah, so do re mi, but I never learned do re mi. So, or at least I never learned anything past do re mi 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 mi. So I don't know where that comes from in the self-absorption, but I've learned over and over. And so if you don't mind, yeah, my wife's family in the Philippines, they're struggling over there. And we see the numbers and the statistics for me and my family. They're not numbers and statistics. This is my nieces and nephews and this, I call it my big fat Filipino family. And So, and the culture, I've learned so much. I think of jazz did not come from universities and schools, and so my wife's, they have a saying called pakikasama, and which is just basically, can we please get along? Can we treat each other with respect? Even to the point that sometimes it's hard to get to the business at hand, because for Filipino culture, that respecting one another. So it's interesting too in America. So America's about 1% Filipino, 7% of healthcare workers in America are Filipinos. So it's just the culture is just so inspiringly and beautiful to me. So I love what you're saying. Yeah, get back to normal. So, yeah, there's so much good to be done in the world, and hopefully this can be a reset button for all of us. And I hope it's not a moment. I hope it's a movement all around. And so, but anyhow, Ben, sorry.
I think it will be. I think there'll be some real change soon. So, Professor Carroll, speaking of education, jazz education, you were at Indiana while David Baker was cultivating this jazz pedagogy. So, how was that experience, and what do you think about jazz pedagogy now, and how it's evolved?
So yeah, David's great. So I saw a bunch of stuff on the internet about David now. And I saw folks criticizing him, and they're clueless about what David was really about. So because I was his assistant, I was there. First and foremost, like David was just an incredible human being. It was just so cool. It was just hip in every possible way. And of course, I asked David before he passed on to be with the Lord, what was it like as an Afro-American building the jazz program in Southern Indiana? And Southern Indiana is the South. Bloomington, it's just 20 miles or so away from Martinsville, the head of the KKK is right there. Yeah, this is true. So he looked at me with a tear in his eyes and he said, Jimmy, it was a witch with a bee. It was hard. He really worked hard there as an Afro-American building that jazz program. But yeah, his message, I mean, this part of the pedagogy we see in the books and so on and so forth, it's a part of it, but there was so much more to David. And the main thing, he, like any great teacher, he passed on his love of the music. I mean, David loved music, and he had such a great groove. I remember, and he could teach these huge classes, and he passed that on to me a little bit of how to do that with varying levels. But there might be like 250 people in his improv class. So we never took solos in there, but he was able to teach that class and pass on, his love of the music. So the curriculum itself is what it was. Curriculum schmurriculum. There's no curriculum. There's no curriculum to teach.
Listen to the records.
Yeah, and David be the absolute first. Yeah, go to the recordings. The music's passed on my ear. All of that, and probably the one thing two things, if you don't mind, I could share about David. One was he just pulled my coat. He loved to say that phrase, by the way. Let me pull your coat. Which in the old days mean, your solo's over, sit down. He's like, but said, let me pull your coat. And he said, Jimmy, you're practicing, man. You got to start enjoying it. Are you having fun playing? You're missing something a little important about all of this. So, but the other thing, I remember a concert we played, and I don't even remember the piece, but it was David. We did a lot of his original music. The changes were hard, and I hadn't had a chance to really work on it. And I got lost, and I'm just out there playing. I think I'm like playing up a half step jive turkey, like young, like trying to, I don't know what. I was just playing,
you were playing out.
I was playing out. But instead of admitting the truth, which is I got lost, and then, I got to like save face, I always say you can't save your face and your butt at the same time. So he said, what were you doing? And I said, I was playing my feelings. And he said, well, you might have been playing your feelings, but nobody wanted to hear it. And I said, David. And he asked, everybody called him David, when I first went there, Professor Baker, and he wanted to be, but he said, he said, nobody wanted to hear. I said, and this was a big mistake. I said, well, David, I wasn't playing for anybody. I was playing for myself. Oh my gosh, when I said that. So he grabbed me and we went into his office and we had an hour conversation, Carlia, and I did no talking. you know, and he told me, look, man, if you're not playing for the audience, look, this is the problem. You know, like, think about Louis Armstrong, and somewhere along the line, we forget about all of this. So, you know, like soldiers, yeah, we are playing for one another. Soldiers fight for one another, but darn right, they're fighting for us. And we're playing for the audience. We're playing for each other. David himself is my audience. And then he explained to me, Jimmy, you're playing for the Most High. And this is some pretty important stuff. So when you played, man, you wanted to have integrity. And he said a few other things like David was great because he could go between, you know, great academic talk and street talk, like like a great blues solo, man. And David just so yeah, that was the great David Baker. And I could tell story after story of, I could say I loved him like a father, and the funny and all of his students or his disciples felt the same way. We felt like we were the only ones, but did have it was good. Walk in and so he had a key to his office and he'd pick up the phone and say, hey, what's shaking? Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, James. Blah, blah. It'd be like James Moody calling. And they'd talk, James Moody would call and say, hey, give me some exercises to work on, like that. But yeah, David was great. And yeah, thank you for asking me about that, Carlia. One thing I will say too, we forget our history. Like I was asking, I had a student audition from Northern Illinois University, and that program, jazz program, was started by Ron Modell. And this young man didn't know the name. So Ron Modell started that program up at Northern, and then over at the University of Illinois, that was John Garvey over there. And John Garvey, man, hey, what about down at Frost? So that school has such an incredible history of pedagogy in the jazz program, people that really sacrificed down there. So in North Texas, that was Leon Breeden. So and Columbus, Ohio, that was Ray I mean, all these places that it's be like one person would come up who loved the music. A lot of times they weren't like Ron Modell wasn't a jazz person, and John Garvey wasn't. Anyhow, I digress.
Wow, that's great. I never really thought about that. The people that made these sacrifices so we could have jazz education, and wow, thank you.
Yeah. So that'd be Go ahead.
Jazz, what do you think the importance of cultural studies is in higher ed?
So, well, back to Wynton Marsalis and the ballad, he says it right in there. That's what's needed. That's what's missing in education. And so Wynton's a little, he always liked to get jabs here and again he's talking about, technological gadgetry and the isolation of technology. He said what's needed in education is more substantive education and more culturally rooted education. And I couldn't agree more. It's like a note, But out of context of harmony, what about the same note, but in the context of harmony? And harmony gives music perspective. And putting things into cultural significance gives it perspective, gives it meaning. So I think I love that you asked that. And can I ask the question, so is that something you've been thinking about? Is something you've been talking about with your professors down there?
I've been doing some research on gospel music because that's what I grew up singing. It has a rich oral tradition. And I think culture is how we experience music early on, our cultural backgrounds, me being in church. And then I got to college and there really wasn't a gospel choir at Mason or any kind of gospel music happening. So that's why I asked that question.
No, I love that question. Yeah, well, and even with wife Jeanette, so in Philippines, of course, I mean, it's just singing and dancing. So what, like in my house, first thing in the morning is singing and dancing. And first time I saw Jeanette doing it, I was like, what the heck? And then I started joining in and yeah, so this is a conversation we set because Jeanette, she was singing, she grew up in a Nipa hut on the island of Leyte, and all she had was a transistor radio. That's it. There's no internet. So my wife is my musical superior. She has an incredible ear. She knows hundreds of songs in her own dialect, also, which is Bisayan dialect in Middle Region Philippines, Tagalog, but English as well. She knows all these tunes. So this is funny, Carly, and you like us because you probably know that my voice is not the best, and I'm working on it. I think it's important when we get older to cross train and to learn something new. So what I'm learning, I'm trying to learn to sing. So I'm teaching this sight singing class, right? And so I finished up the class, and hey, I'm at a point where I can be vulnerable, and I think it makes me a good teacher. Hey, y'all, I'm not really all that good at this, and Lynette was outside rolling in belly laughter. I don't want to tell you. So yeah, culturally rooted education, important.
And then, I mean, just like from my background, there's so many great like gospel composers that aren't, when we study composers in higher ed, they're kind of left out. And I'm like, but this is good music. These are great composers. So we're kind of like neglecting a whole genre of composers.
You're so right about that. So, uh, so I had the great honor of sponsoring the United Vessels of Unity. You probably know they are a club at George Mason, and my role is just so they have a place to sing. So I'm not, but I wanted to suggest a curriculum in gospel music. So as far as I know, help me with this. There are only two in America. I think some in DC has a curriculum. Berkeley has a gospel music curriculum. But that seems like something absolutely that we should be adding to our curriculum. And I think, maybe, and I'd suggest I talk to some folks about doing it and so on and so forth at Mason. I think we could do it. But yeah, wouldn't that be great? So, but anyhow, yeah.
Okay, Professor Carroll, take me back. How did you get your start in music?
So it just same story as every band. So yeah, in band. So fifth grade, and I hated it.
Oh,
So actually, I took piano lessons even before that. I remember now. Mrs. Olreda would come. She would come to our house, and Jimmy, I'd be out playing baseball. Jimmy, and I would pretend that I couldn't hear it at my piano lesson. I get my little butt whipped, and in those days, the corporal punishment was there, but I was clueless, Carlia. If they didn't put on the music, like this is number 1, 2, 3, what to push keys. I took all these piano lessons, and I did not correlate what those little dots on the page and I did not figure that out. And I went in band, and I hated it, and I was terrible, and I'd never practiced. I had a bad horn. And my brother, on the other hand, my brother plays principal trumpet in the San Antonio Symphony. So he did not drop out, which I dropped out of band. And I didn't like it. I didn't like the piano lessons. I didn't like anything about it. But he kept playing. He put a little like a garage band together. And he did some Herb Alpert and the Tijuana brass music. Yeah, so I said, like, wow, he's really enjoying it. And I will tell you, so I decided to rejoin the band, and I just kind of planted a notion in my head that I was going to start practicing. And I did. I just started playing a couple hours a day. So I made my jump to light speed when I was in 7th and 8th grade. And then my father took me to see Duke Ellington. That changed everything. Like, I thought music was just those piano lessons. Like, I had no idea that this world, that's what I was telling my students, you got to go exploring. You got to go figure stuff out for yourself and go see what's out there. And the greatest thing about music, and I'll tell you, you probably know it, it'll take you around the world. I mean, if you stay in, I've had a life beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, got to go everywhere in the world and travel and, meet different people. And that's the greatest thing ever. So anyhow, and then after, it's just one thing. So actually, though, I was going to do electrical engineering at the University of Illinois. And I was headed there just because everybody told me, don't go into jazz, don't go into music. You can't make a living in music, blah, blah, blah. And for real, somebody said, you'll end up at the back of some Holiday Inn playing tunes. Yeah. And when they said that, I'm telling you, Carlia, I thought, really? I could do that? Sounds good to me. I like that.
What advice would you have for someone that's going through the same thing today? They want to major in music and their parents are saying, maybe not. You won't make a living doing it.
That's tough. And so, I think, regarding that topic, and forgive me if I seem a little just contrary, but I never give another human being advice. I don't think anybody, I think this is a problem, for me, just to to love myself, and I've struggled with that and self-esteem, and I'm always trying to please what other people want me to do, whether it's parents or friends. And those really, really well-meaning people, teachers, parents, friends, they chain us. I mean, they put that glass ceiling there, and when I'm trying to please them. So first of all, I don't think any human being, when one human being thinks they know what's best for another human being, I think that's a dark path. How could we possibly know God's plan for? It's so much bigger and beautiful and incredible than anything this little brain could come up with. So I don't give advice. But I know we have to figure it out for ourselves, and we have to stay true to ourselves. And so my dream was not like the American dream. I wanted to play, and I remember, as a matter of fact, the exact day when Woody called to go out on the road. An hour later, I had gotten a call for a college teaching job. The saxophone teacher had passed on to be with the Lord. He was flying home and blah, blah, blah. And I remember my friend Larry, who had worked gigs, says, "Hey, it's this great tenure track college job." I said, "Dude, I'm going out with Woody Herman." I said, "You're crazy. You're going to give up a college job, full-time tenure track, to go out on a road band?" Carly, I never considered taking that job, even for a split second. Are you kidding me? I get to go out on the road and play with Woody. And in those days, I mean, that band was roaring. And quite frankly, I, yeah, man, I really met my match. I was not really prepared for the level of musicianship on that. Those cats could really play. But regarding young folks and advice, I say I never give advice. You know, we all have to find our own path, and what one person's dream is. And the other thing is, we don't all experience this the same way. My experience with this are my experiences. And I think the most important part is that we do have friends, and that we can share feelings. Sharing feelings is the greatest way of communicating with one another. And so when we're making those decisions, but the other thing, frankly, is God just seems to take care of it. He just puts us where we belong. And sometimes it's what I call butt prints in the sand. The footprints in the sand. My precious Lord, I was with you. Well, sometimes he drops us on our butt too. And that has very much helped me. So, it's those failures. And just so happens where I thought I wanted this gig. And so there have been several times where I've lost gigs because I made some, how do I put it? I messed up. And it ended up, it just turning out better. It's just like, wow, So yeah, I just, stay in faith. Hope is the first step to faith. I hope for this. And then, so in terms of getting advice for young students, practice and everything. So then at the end, as an old dude now, the music is so incredibly beautiful. Jobs are good. I understand we got to put food on the table. I get that, but I don't know if you noticed, but I haven't been missing any meals recently. So the music is great, and to play long and to play hard, and to share the music with one another, and to be on the bandstand with other really, really great musicians, and then to pass it on, to younger folks, all of that stuff. And yeah, I don't think our politicians, I like, by the way, Sonny has several, Sonny Rollins. Man, Sonny said politics on. He said that's little picture items, and he admits he's a political junkie, but the arts are big picture items. I don't think folks we're so focused that the answers are over here and solving it in this manner. When I really think, again, back to Winton, so many answers are contained in the music. And if we would open our hearts up to let the music come into our innermost soul, these musicians like Billie Holiday, and I mean, the list. Where is the list? It's and I would encourage. So the internet has no beginning and it has no end. I mean, we get in there and it's just raw. So Jamie Aebersold has a great website on there. He's got all this free material, but the most important thing he has is the list of historically significant. That list, which is a lifetime's worth of listening. So anyhow, I'm long-winded, Carlia, forgive me.
No, it's great. It's great. That's so true. I think, there's a lot of people with great jobs that are very unhappy.
It's true. You know,
And
that quote unquote success and the money, and that's its own curse and chains. Oh yeah.
so let's talk about what's your creative process like, whether that's programming your shows, writing, learning, arranging. What's your process?
So, well, I'm not sure on that. So, but a lot of times the stuff comes so fast. I really don't have time to think about it.
Oh, wow.
So there's a deadline, deadline, deadline. But a lot of times it'll happen like driving to work. Oh yeah, I'll get this, or programming, or just something will come on. I like XM, Sirius XM, the real jazz station. So a lot of times by happenstance, stuff comes on. So cutting the grass a lot of times. So, but regarding practicing and all of that, one thing that I do suggest, it's only suggestion, you know, this is play the blues every day, every single day, play the blues. Just a simple idea like that, just 12 bars, done. The next day, maybe play like 5 choruses. And then doing that for a year or two changes everything. Most folks, especially students, are bombarded with so much, like learning one song, like Have Your Ballad, you know, like I've been playing Come Sunday just because I just love that song. I love the melody, and I love the notion behind it and the words. And I love that it's Ellington and Black, Brown, and Beige, and you know, the sacred concerts, he used that also. So I just play that song over and over and over. I play it every day and think of the meaning of it when I do my prayers in the morning. So for creative process, I think that idea of repetition, and sometimes it's just I do it by rote, I'll admit. And then the next day, I don't know why, Carlia. One thing in learning, you know, is we got to be willing to stay on that plateau, you know, sometimes for a long period of time. And I just feel like I'm going through the just like doing it over and over. Think about David telling me to enjoy it. But so I don't have a good answer for that
Well,
question.
that is a good answer. Okay, so you mentioned that you've had the life of your dreams with music. So what is your favorite country that you visited?
So, well, one of the favorite concerts I did, we played a concert in the ruins of Pompeii, the old city of Pompeii in Italy. Yeah, it was incredible. It was you know, when I was on the road, maybe I was out there 3.5 years. It's tough. That's a tough life. I will tell you this, and I know I've shared with you personally before, and for anybody listening, I wasn't prepared for the road. I was totally not prepared because I went out there with no spiritual life. And so I will say I had some fun. And we lived in New Orleans for a while, had a club down there, and I participated in the culture, let me put it that way. But but I was not prepared for it, you know. So but anyhow, that aside, and so there were great highs and great lows. But yeah, Pompeii. Also, really enjoyed. We did the jazz festival, Oryx Jazz Festival, in in Yokohama Stadium outside of Tokyo. But recently, you know, we got to take the band to China. We went to Beijing. We went to Shanghai with our school band. And then, of course, I never thought I'd get to go to the Philippines. My wife takes me there. I get to visit that. But in America too, we got to play every. So, but if you don't mind, I would. There was one thing I was just thinking about. I hadn't thought about it in ages. So, um, when I was in college, I got to play. I got hooked up with folks that I got to back up for all the Motown groups. So I got to tour with Michael Jackson and the
How
Jackson
did
Five.
that happen? Tell us about that. Tell us about
So
Mike.
yeah, so in music, you know, and music is a different culture in terms of networking. Like if you're a musician in jazz, I really don't think you have to do a lot of network in terms of playing. Now, maybe in terms of websites, and maybe things are different now, but in those days, you just get on a gig and all the guys on the band in those days, just guys, unfortunately, but the cats would hear you and then they would hire you for another. And so it was a guy in the band, Larry Wiseman was his name. And he was hooked up with all the Motown groups and at Indiana because they could hire us real cheap and we could read. Uh, and, uh, and I had a car. It was really, I made more money driving than the gig itself most of the time. But I got to play all these gigs. So we go out with the Temptations and I backed them up a lot. A lot of cats did all of those gigs, but I got a part of the circuit. So I was doing the Temptations and it was the Jackson Five. That was a blast. But I will tell you, Carleo, that got old after a while. And, you know, and frankly, you know, I didn't go to Indiana University so I could play with the Jacksons. I played with the Jacksons to get money so I could study with David Baker because I wanted to learn about Duke Ellington and Charlie Parker and John Coltrane. So even though I love the pop culture and all of that was really fun, it was so exciting, but it loses its luster after a while. And yeah, I got and look in the car even on the way back, we weren't listening to Michael. We were listening to, I remember like McCoy Tyner, Fly with the Wind. We're listening to that's great car music and so on. But anyhow, I do want to say one story. So in Motown, there's a famous who is not well known, and there's so many people behind the scenes that are doing great work. You're one of them, just anonymously, just doing good in the world. So his name was Mr. Maurice King, and he was a great fixture in Detroit, and he was mentor and father figure to a lot of great Motown artists. But so anyhow, I got hired to play with the Spinners. So here's this little white guy coming in with my alto saxophone. I'm probably like 19 years old, maybe 20 years old. And Mr. King looked at me and glared. I'll never forget it. Like he wanted to kill me. And he looked over at the contract. It wasn't Larry, was the subcontractor. The other guy's name was Dag Walton. He looked over at Dag and was like, what? So, I thought, oh gosh, I'm walking in and I'm very self-conscious, sat down, but we had to rehearsal with the Spinners. And man, I just love that music, frankly. I just love it. And, so anyhow, forgive my arrogance, but I did a good job. And
Do you have?
but it's a reading gig, Carlio. So I could read. So anyhow, so Mr. King, he was a man of very few words, but a moment that I'll never forget. So I'm playing, and he was old lead alto player in the big band days,
Oh, wow.
and Maurice King was always about putting the best band together, regardless of race, regardless of age. He wanted to put the very best band together, beginning, middle, and end of story. And so I was playing. I can't see him. You kind of look, and I'm looking at him. I'm just nervous that I'm going to mess up this gig. And so we finished. And when we finished, he didn't say anything. He came over to me with his hand, and he cupped my cheek in his hand. Yeah. And it was just, he didn't even say like, good job, son, or and he looked at me. It was a moment I'll never forget as long as I live. Yeah. Mr. Maurice King. He's unknown and he's since passed on, and, in that whole period and all of that. But again, even that, my students, I was talking about the temps because I want to teach Dorian minor, give you courage to face the world. So I was asking my students about the Temptations. They never heard of the Temptations. So I don't know.
Everybody knows my girl.
Hey, yeah. How could you not know my girl? That's right. Well, they just don't know the name then. But those were fun days and all of those gigs. And so,
Have any Michael Jackson stories?
so not a lot. So I got to hang out with Michael a couple of times. And it is, but so I'm studying with David. So I'm practicing rhythm changes and bebop, working on all that. So this is a true story that Michael did tell me. You're a strange man, he said to me. This is true. It's really odd. I was just playing, yeah. And so, but then it was just fun, man. It was a great time, I remember a stage used to go up in the air in these huge, like the Omni in Atlanta, like huge arenas we would play. And the stage was like a theater in the round, would go around in circles. And Michael was the most sure-footed man I ever saw in my life. Just and that thing that he does where they lean forward. So he has those shoes so there are nails in the stage, and he hooks those shoes on. Wow. I didn't know anything about those shoes, and it's like just being that close to it and seeing that took my breath away. I mean, I'm like, what the heck? I don't understand. I didn't realize what was going on until I found out later, that there were those magic shoes that he had. But no, Mike was great, and I didn't interface with him that much, frankly. So.
Wow, that's great though. But you're telling me that the leaning forward was fake. It was all a scam.
So you can check that out. He's got a patent, or he had a patent, obviously, on those shoes. Yeah, there were shoes that had a little slit in the bottom. You can check it out online. So not fake, I guess, but they all would do that, and they would hook nails or big bolts would come up in the stage out of the floor, and the shoes would hook on those bolts, and that's how they were able to lean forward far like that. So yeah.
So now I have some quick fun questions. Fun. Okay. So Professor Carroll, if you were not a musician, what would you do?
Oh boy. Yeah, and if I think too long, it won't be. So, well, I took flying lessons for a while. I would really like. I really enjoyed it, but because of my eyesight, I couldn't fly. But I'd like to be a pilot.
Oh, that's a fun
So,
job.
well, but right now, I'll go back. I want to be a gypsy, or like I want to be. My wife and I were talking. I want to run away and just like live. Like my middle name is Robert, so I want to be a boxcar Bobby.
Whoa. Okay. So if you could choose one style period of jazz to describe you, what would it be?
Bebop.
Wow.
So
I knew it.
yeah, stuck in the black hole of bebop. I just love that style. I mean, I'll probably never. It's just for me, Carlia. It's just where everything makes sense. Man, 8 bars of Bird on the bridge of a rhythm tune. You could have a 4-year curriculum right there. What that man was doing.
So what are your favorite changes to play over?
Oh, so well, I don't have, but I would say, yeah, blues every day. We never get tired of playing the blues. Like Cannon said, you got to pay your respects to the blues. But all those old tunes still, I still love doing Cherokee and the standards and rhythm changes and blues. But yeah, I think songs are like cities, and every little, like it's visiting a city. And when you learn a tune, you really want to get to know that city extremely well, so you can do what you want in there. So they all offer, different. Yeah.
Okay, so the last question. So one of my favorite things would be when you would say, "Hello, my friend," or "Your destiny is greatness." I really like those things because, I think that everyone's destiny is greatness. But the other side is like you have to pursue that greatness. You have to put some work in. So everyone does have the potential to be great. So I was just wondering, where did that come from?
So I have no idea. I just, I, so, well, I'm a little bit embarrassed. So how do I say it? I want to keep my anonymity, but I do belong to a group of people that's what we talk about. We talk about doing good, and we talk about bringing people up in this world. And Carlia, by the way, your destiny is greatness. I know that. Look at you. I'm so proud of you. And you're right. You said it too, because it takes discipline. And the pain of discipline pales compared to the pain of regret. And a lot of folks don't want to have that. They don't want to play the blues every day. They don't want to practice and, or have that daily routine. And so those good habits are hard to form and easy to live with. Bad habits are easy to form and hard to live with. So, and I've done that. So where that came from, I guess, is just use me as a good example of a bad example. I learned it by not doing those things.
My mom always says, "Do as I say, not as I do."
I love that. I love your mom. Man, I'll never forget the time your mom was outside. I'll never forget that as long as I live. I fell in love with your mom, and just remember well, I don't want to, I'm going to embarrass you by saying, I don't even,
I'm
she brought you lunch, remember?
Yeah.
And she was waiting for you. Like, I thought, oh man, what a family. I want to join that family.
Thank you, Professor Carroll. This has been great. This has been a fun time. So, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Professor Jim Carroll, and we'll be back next week with another Music is Unity Artist series.
Yeah, Carlia. Yeah. Thank you, Carlia.